everybody. Welcome to Odd and Untold, the podcast where we talk about all things strange and spooky. And this week, we're going to be talking more Bigfoot. I had mentioned in last week's episode, Bigfoot encounters in New Jersey, Sussex County, that I would have to break the episode up into two parts. And I thought I'd come back to this, maybe a few weeks from now, because I did find a large number, quite a few Bigfoot reports from Sussex County in New Jersey. And I couldn't do them all last week. So I said, I'll do another episode at another point. But I'm bringing you part two this week. We had gone back to the Ren Fair last weekend and had a lot of fun, as it always is. It's just such a great vibe at Ren Fairs, and Sparta Ren Fair is great. It's a little smaller, so it's a little bit more intimate. It takes place in an old summer camp, so it's very woodsy. There's trails, there's trees. It's not like the other Ren Fairs where it's more like a town with pavement. I mean, this is all just grass and dirt trails. So you do really kind of feel like you're in the woods. We love the Sparta Fair. And the people there are just so great. Everybody will talk to you. Everyone's there for the same reason, and everyone's just so chill. And people will come up and talk to you about your costume. They'll talk to you about the food you're eating. There's just this camaraderie there, and it's just so great. And we love it. And we took our friend Anastasia this time. So we had a lot of fun. There's three of us, and we just had a great time, watching the shows and, the joust and, the Foxy Bard, our favorite, and Twig. So had a really good time and kind of riding that high of enjoying the Ren Fair, and thought I would do part two this week because I'm kind of still in that mode and in that vibe, and wanted to just talk more about Bigfoot in Sussex County. Before I get into the episode proper, I just want to do a few quick housekeeping things. One, I just want to thank everybody for tuning in every week. I know some of you have been here since the very beginning, or very early on, and I appreciate you guys so much. I mean, you guys have helped me build this channel. I'm over 1,000 subscribers now on YouTube, and on the audio platforms. We get lots of listens, so that's great. Thank you so much. I'm also getting a lot of new people and new comments, emails, comments on the YouTube videos, just new people saying, hey, I just found your channel. I'm so glad I found it. So welcome to all of you who have just kind of joined us here. This is episode 115, so there's 114 older episodes. We have bonus content on YouTube, some really cool videos. Some of them are just kind of silly. Others are a little bit more serious. But we have a lot of content, a lot of episodes to go back and check out. So I, again, just wanted to thank everybody for tuning in every week, for finding the show, for the compliments on the show, for your feedback. I really do appreciate the feedback. I appreciate you guys when you comment about your own stories or just your thoughts on the episode. I love just the dialogue going back and forth. Again, all I ever ask is be respectful. You don't have to agree with everything I say or my guests say, but just please be respectful. I occasionally have to delete a nasty comment just because, the internet is full of trolls. Who would have guessed? So just please be respectful. I will leave all comments up as long as they're respectful. Doesn't have to agree with us, but just please be respectful, and, we can have a dialogue about it. But again, just wanted to thank everybody. And, thanks to my family for supporting me. My dad, my son, my buddies, John, Josh, and Scott, who all been on the show and work kind of behind the scenes to help me put some shows together. So I appreciate you guys. Lovely Rebecca, Christy, so many people who just, do things for me behind the scenes and support the show and have made it what it is today. So thank you all for that. And lastly, I just wanted to give another plug to my buddy Andy over at Spooky Island Radio. I'm going to be on his show. You're listening to this, if it's the day that it came out, on Friday, the 27th. I will be on his show, Spooky Island Radio Podcast, on September 30th. So be sure to check that out. I always love speaking to Andy. He's a great guy. We kind of started our shows right around the same time, and we've been kind of helping each other over the past couple of years, just to boost each other up and to encourage each other. And he's just a great guy, and I love his podcast. It's like one of the very few that I'm like religiously listening to whenever it comes out. And he just kind of came back from a little break over the summer. So go check out his podcast. He does a lot of missing 411 stuff and ghost stories, and just a really well-produced podcast and cool music. And he's just got a great voice, much better than mine. So go give him a listen. I'm going to link to his podcast below, but I will be on his show on Monday, September 30th. He was on this show once before, and we talked about missing 411 and Bigfoot and all sorts of cool stuff, and we had a great time. So I was on his show recently, and that will be published on Monday. So please check that out. And with that all being said, let's get to some more Bigfoot stories. Okay, so I have four stories for you guys tonight. And before I get into them, I just want to say usually I try to balance the stories. I try to do a few stories that are really compelling. And then I do a couple of stories that I can really poke some holes in. You know, the skeptic in me can kind of say that's clearly not a Bigfoot, that's clearly a bear, or it's clearly not a UFO. I try to have that balance, but we're kind of getting into the Halloween season. And like I said, I'm kind of feeling good from the Ren Fair. And so this week I figured I'm just going to focus on some stories that are a little bit harder to debunk. There's going to be no howls and no tree knocks. Again, I like those stories to a point, but if there's nothing else surrounding them, if it's just people hearing a knock or people hearing a howl and there's no sighting, there's nothing else going on, it's not really that impressive because it could be anything. People are in the woods. Sounds in the woods can sound spooky and scary. And if someone's unfamiliar with these sounds, they're, oh, it's Bigfoot. So I'm avoiding those tonight. So I have four stories for you that are kind of like visual sightings. Like these people saw something. So, and we'll get into that. But it's not just this sort of vague howl or a tree knock or a sensation of being watched. Like these are actual encounters. So they saw something. So let's get into that. I just wanted to give a little preface before I got into it, but we're going to have some fun. It's Halloween season. Let's talk about some cool Bigfoot sightings. So again, these are all from Sussex County, New Jersey. This one is a nighttime encounter at a garbage dumpster in Hamburg near the Delaware Water Gap. This is from November of 1997. And we do hear a lot of this about Bigfoot sightings happening near dumpsters. They sort of come out of the woods, and a lot of people will see them kind of like rummaging through dumpsters or garbage cans. And, you know, I guess they need to eat too. So let's get into the story and then I will share my thoughts. So location details. He says, I forget the name of the apartment complex, but it is on Route 94 in Hamburg, New Jersey, and has been there for decades. My street was called Wits End Drive. That much I do remember. So again, you're going back many years, and I don't know how long he lived here for. The nearest town is Hamburg. Nearest road is Route 94. Observed. I'm reporting this approximately 10 years after the fact. My wife had asked me to retell my story to her this morning, and that is what prompted us to stumble across this website. Late fall of 1997, or possibly 96, I was coming out of my apartment's laundry facility, which is a separate building not connected to the actual apartment buildings. I must have heard something because I looked to my right and there it was, about 20 feet away. The creature was about 5.5 to 6 feet tall. I'd guess it was around 200 pounds. There was no odor and it made no sound. I saw it as it was rooting through a garbage dumpster. In a matter of seconds, my brain went through a kind of checklist to try to rationalize what I was seeing. But it was not a bear. It was too slim in relation to its height. It also moved in a way that was very human. It was nighttime, but there was a parking lot light on overhead. I could see hair that was brown and about 4 to 7 inches in length. Unfortunately, primitive survival instinct and adrenaline took over. I bolted toward my apartment, running so fast that I lost my footing as I was going through a dip in the terrain. I landed arms first and slid across a gravel-covered road. As I got to my feet, I looked over my shoulder to see that it too had run and was about 200 feet from where we had met. I'm certain it was not an animal that is commonly known to people. It was humanoid in appearance and movement. The way it stopped what it was doing, turned its head, and looked at me was freaky. Because of the shadows, I couldn't get a look at its face. The incident didn't change my life or anything. I hardly ever think about it unless I look at my elbow. I scraped it really bad when I fell running and have a scar to this day. When I first told the story to my wife, she was very taken aback because she knows that I am a very rational and analytic person. So he says it was just him. He lived alone at the time, not aware of any other stories. He says it was probably around 11 p.m. at night. Halogen parking lot lights directly above the meeting scene. It was cold, probably late fall, almost winter. The environment was a large rural apartment complex, parking lots and cars all around, no other people to be seen. So let me read the follow-up investigation by BFRO investigator Paul Conroy, and then I'll give my thoughts as I usually do. So Paul says, I interviewed this witness for approximately 40 minutes. When I asked him how he could differentiate between the creature that he encountered versus a bear, he stressed the animal's human-like movement when it was turned to face him. He said that he was under the distinct impression that it was analyzing him in a very human-like manner. The color was described as dark brown with a reddish tint, and the length of the arms compared to that of a bear were significantly longer. The witness was adamant that it was not a bear and it was not a person, but some kind of animal not known to people. So then he goes into his own notes here about Hamburg, New Jersey. It's a hilly, heavily forested, rural corner of the state near the Delaware Water Gap. This part of New Jersey is much more like Pennsylvania than the Jersey that most people know. A railroad bed runs through Hamburg. This railroad bed runs near a handful of large golf courses. The relevancy of those factors. Bigfoot are occasionally spotted on or near golf courses. We actually had a story last week that was by a golf course that are frequented by herds of deer at night. In the Midwest and eastern states, sightings and track finds often occur near railroad beds, usually abandoned railroad beds, but not always. It is suspected that Bigfoot may sometimes use railroad beds at night to walk to habitation/feeding areas near those routes. So to address that real quick, you'll also see like the cuts for the power lines, like going through the woods. You'll see just these like open spaces where the big towers go through. People will also say in there, they'll see a lot of Bigfoot creatures. And I guess because if they have to cross, there's really no cover. Or it's also just, the path of least resistance. It's all cut down and it's just grass. So you don't have to kind of go through heavily wooded areas. So just something to think about. This story, very interesting to me. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we do hear a lot of Bigfoot reports near dumpsters at night. A lot of people will talk about they went out back, they're either working or they're at home and they'll go out to throw out the garbage. And there's a Bigfoot creature by the dumpster kind of going through it. So that's what this guy here sees. The height doesn't seem too impressive, 5.5 to 6 feet tall. So maybe a juvenile, maybe a female, maybe his perceptions are off a little bit. No odor, no sound. The thing that gets me is that he's saying he went through this checklist in his mind. And I think a lot of people who witness things like this, whether it's a UFO or a ghost or Bigfoot or whatever is weird, most people are going to go through that checklist in our mind because we don't want to say, oh, I'm seeing Bigfoot or I'm seeing an alien spacecraft or I'm seeing a ghost. They're trying to say, is that a trick of my eye? Am I seeing a bear? Is that just a plane? We don't want to see something scary. We're trying to say, oh, what is that? Because, when you're out there like that, especially in the woods, you have to be far more worried about bears or other people than Bigfoot, if Bigfoot even exists. We don't even know if it exists. So the logical thing to be afraid of is wild animals and other people. So someone's going through a dumpster. Is it a bear? And right away, he's sort of saying, no, it's not. It's moving like a human. It's standing up. The arms are too long. The way it's looking at me. Again, if this were a bear, it would have heard him. It would have probably dropped back down to 4 legs and run off. It's not going to stand there on its 2 legs, looking at him and kind of maybe cocking its head, trying to figure him out. This guy is pretty certain that what he saw was not a bear and probably not a person, because then it's not going to run back into the woods. It's not going to be covered in hair as a person. So again, you have one of these stories where he saw something. This isn't just a howl or a tree knock. He saw something. He saw a figure. It was either a person and he just misidentified it, a bear, which it doesn't sound like, or a Bigfoot. So very interesting to me. Again, he doesn't bring it up a lot. He's saying he only really thinks about it when he looks at his arm. It doesn't sound like a particularly scary encounter. He saw something and he ran and it ran, and it was 10 years ago. And I think a lot of people who witness these things, it's not the first thing you talk about. You don't just meet somebody and, hey, let me tell you about this time I saw Bigfoot. You talk about other things in your life. It doesn't define you. And it happened many years ago, and just his wife wanted to hear the story, and it reminded him of this. So very interesting. So there's definitely things here that tell me possible Bigfoot here. I don't think this was a bear. Could have been a person, but I don't think so. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below about story number 1 here. Okay, story number 2, daylight sighting with 2 witnesses. This comes to us from July of 1978, again, Sussex County. Location details: Maxim Drive is the closest main road. Camp Trail is the closest road. It's a dead-end street about 2.5 blocks long. Nearest town is Hoppetkong, and Lake Hoppetkong is down there. It's a big lake near Sparta, near where we went to the Ren Fair. So All this is in kind of the same area. Nearest road is Maxim Drive, and I will go into the narrative here. Observed. My friend and I were about 11 years old. We had found some old Playboy books and were sitting on a big rock in the woods looking at them when we heard a small dead tree fall over. We look up and saw what we believed to be Bigfoot. He was about 8 or 9 feet tall and was walking horizontal to us. It was walking from right to left and was walking toward a small stream. It didn't seem to care about us, but we didn't stick around to find out. We ran out of the woods very quickly. We had a small dog with us that ran towards the creature, but later came back home with no problems. We got home and got our BB guns and a tape recorder and went back up to where we had the sighting. I guess we thought we were going to be famous. We found no evidence. The next day in the paper, there was a front page article about footprints being found. Interesting. So the two witnesses, just this guy and his friend. Other stories. I've heard animal screaming noises in 1985 on a campout about 4 miles away, but I don't know if one has to do with the other. We just dismissed it as a wounded animal. It did seem to circle the camp for a while, late at night, 2 to 4 a.m. This was on a high school senior campout. Time and conditions, just very normal wood scene, regular woods with a stream running through it. There's no follow-up here. But this one, interesting again. You have two young boys, 11 years old. And as I mentioned in other episodes prior to this, children can be really good witnesses and they can be also really bad witnesses. And take it from somebody who's trained to interview children for a living, in my job as a social worker and child protective specialist. Kids can be eerily accurate or just wildly inaccurate. So the height, I'm going to give them a little pass on that. 8 or 9 feet tall seems a little high, usually 7 or 8. But they see something that's clearly not a bear. It's walking. It's not on all fours. It's walking on 2 feet. They thought it was Bigfoot. I mean, these are kids seeing something. And again, people know what a bear looks like. I don't care how often you're in the woods, what type of city person you are, you're going to know what a bear looks like. And it's interesting that they're saying it didn't seem to care about them. It's just kind of walking, sees these two kids there. Maybe it didn't see them, but it just walks. And I think it's interesting that these kids went home and got BB guns thinking that that would deter a 9-foot tall, hairy humanoid. But, you know, kids do silly things. So I'm not sure what to think about this one. Like I said, kids, it's hard for me to always take what they say seriously, but sometimes they see things that, you know, and they're very honest and pure about what they see or what they say they saw or experienced. So very simple story. There's no follow-up here. I don't know if this person left an email address or, you know, maybe they didn't want to be contacted. Who knows? But this is from 1978. And they saw a Bigfoot. Doesn't sound like a bear. Could it have been a person? Possibly. But again, people know what a person looks like. Man in a ghillie suit? Very possibly. Maybe that's why he didn't, you know, seem to care about the kids. He's just kind of doing his hunt. But you'd think that anybody seeing two boys in the woods would go over to them and be like, hey, you know, I'm not a monster. I'm a guy going out hunting. Who knows, though? But again, let me know what you guys think below on this one. So story number 3 is another sighting. This is a recollection of a late night road crossing while driving near Branchville. So another road crossing. I feel like almost every episode I do about Bigfoot has at least one road crossing where there's a car coming and this thing kind of darts out in front of it, where if it could have just waited 10 seconds, nobody would have ever seen it. So it just makes you wonder why these things are constantly running out in front of cars. Again, deer and other animals, they're not too smart. You could kind of understand that, but a Bigfoot, this, you know, primitive primate that's supposed to be intelligent and cannot be found, why is it darting out in front of headlights constantly? Don't know. And Scott and I talk about this all the time, and we don't have any answers. So if you guys have any thoughts or theories, let us know in the comments below. Sussex County, as they all are. Location details: Lake Owasso Road, Old Route 527. Nearest town is Branchville. Nearest road is Route 206. Observed. This was 2 a.m. summer morning, 1977. They say, while traveling back from the Dover station and returning to Camp Kayamisha, a group of counselors encountered a large creature as it crossed the road in about 3 steps. It stood about 7 feet tall, and as it crossed the road, it turned, and our headlights caught its shape and eyes. It had crossed between us and another car. It was at least 3 foot higher than the car in front of us. From the low area to the left to the mountain area on the right, I was driving that van. I slammed on the brakes and asked everyone if they saw what I had seen. They did. I then got out with a flashlight and another friend to investigate. The ground on the right where it had gone into was loose dirt and rocky area, but no footprints were found and the creature was gone. We waited there for some time, even stopped a car traveling in the same direction for help, but they only stayed long enough for us to say what we had seen and sped off. When we reached the camp, we called the New Jersey State Police to report our find, but they wouldn't believe us. Shocking. In March of 1978, I led a Bigfoot hunt on Mount Paradise near Crandon Lake and found footprints in the snow. It's been 34 years since this incident, and it still seems like yesterday. Only the names of my friends have faded. I've camped in the area ever since, hoping for another encounter. I've hiked the Appalachian Trail and Tillman's Ravine to Sunfish Pond, Blue Mountain Lakes, and I'm still looking today as I have read of strange noises in the Walpack Valley. I know what I saw. Are the witnesses, he's saying there's 5 people witnessed the sighting. Before the sighting, they were just listening to music and talking about going canoeing. So these are not people out there searching for Bigfoot at this point. I guess he says later on he did start looking for Bigfoot, but at this point, no. Other stories. In the media in 1977, 3 boys got lost in Bear Swamp looking for Bigfoot. A local man found and cast Bigfoot prints on Paradise Mountain near Crandon Lake. This was about 2 to 3 in the morning. Lighting was dark. The road was dry. They were near Bear Swamp, mountains to the right. So the follow-up investigation by BFRO investigator Larry Rippon. Larry says, I spoke with the witness over the phone. The witness observed a large 7-foot bipedal creature cross the road in front of his van. From his vantage point, behind the wheel of the vehicle, the witness stated that the top of the figure's head appeared to be 3 feet higher than the roof of a car traveling roughly 25 to 30 feet in front of him, going in the same direction. The figure moved from southeast to northwest, coming from the Bear Swamp Wildlife Management Area, across the road and up a mountain embankment towards the Appalachian Trail. The witness described the creature's head as human-like with glaring eyes and had long arms swinging back and forth. The witness could not recall facial features. After passing the creature, the witness made a U-turn, and he and a fellow counselor exited the vehicle in an attempt to locate the Bigfoot. The witness claims he grabbed a road flare and searched for the creature, but he could see no Bigfoot. Only heard the crashing and breaking of branches as if something big was maneuvering through the brush and up the steep mountainside. The witness was with 4 other counselors who claimed to have also witnessed the event. I was unable to interview the other witnesses. And he notes that this witness appeared on the Northern New Jersey Finding Bigfoot episode, which reenacted this story. During the reenactment, the witness claimed he used a road flare as a flashlight to try to see the creature. In his initial report to the BFRO, he states he used a flashlight. When I questioned the witness, he stated he couldn't remember the exact details. So here's another one with multiple witnesses. It's a roadside crossing, which is weird. And it doesn't sound like a bear. Again, this is something running across the road on two feet, 2 legs. Bears aren't going to do this. And it crosses the road in 3 steps, and it's taller than the car in front of it by about 3 feet. So a tall figure, about 7 feet tall, clearly not a bear. Don't know what it was. He's saying he sees the eyes, but no facial features. And again, this is what you'd expect at night, especially with a quick sighting like this. You're not going to get a lot of detail, but if a bear is going to run out on all 4s, so is a mountain lion, so is a deer. I mean, you're going to see these things and be like, oh my God, that was a deer, that was a wolf, that was a coyote, that was a bear. What is running across the road at 2 or 3 in the morning in the backwoods of Jersey in 1977? That's covered in hair, on 2 feet, 2 legs, and is 7 feet tall. I wish they could have interviewed the other witnesses. It sounds like, this is a long time ago. He forgets their names, and it does happen. I was in the Boy Scouts and had a lot of friends in the Boy Scouts, and this, you're going 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 35. And I remember a few of them, like their first names, but if I wanted to look them up now, I couldn't find them on Facebook. I have a first, one of them I remember because his name was also Jason. So very easy to remember, but I don't remember his last name. I don't remember any of the other boys, their names. I knew them at the time. We were in the troop together for years, and I don't remember their names. So It's always a shame when that happens because you have this really cool story and you can't really talk to anybody else about it. So you got to take this guy's word for it. But interesting that they're not talking about Bigfoot. They're not thinking about Bigfoot. But after this, he kind of got into Bigfoot. So it's almost like it sparked his interest in Bigfoot. And that happens with a lot of people. A lot of people don't even give these things the time of day, until you see a UFO, until you see Bigfoot, until you have a paranormal experience that you can't explain, then that kind of gets you into it. For most people, they're going to start like really looking into it because they want answers. They want to know, what did I see? And hopefully it leads them to shows like mine. So interesting story. I like this one again because it's very clearly not a bear. So either this person is lying. I don't think they are. They saw a man in a suit, or they saw Bigfoot. So only three possibilities. So very cool story. Let's move on to our last one. Okay, so that brings us to our last story of the evening. And there's more stories from Sussex, but again, a lot of them are howls, smells, things like that. You can check out the BFRO website. There's more stories here. Like I said, tonight I just wanted to cover like sightings, people seeing something, not just hearing something off in the woods. That could be any number of things. This one gets a little bit long in the follow-up investigation, so just bear with me. And this one, teens have scary encounter in abandoned creamery near Sussex. And this was in 76 or 77. I think they're a little iffy on when it happened, December or the fall. Location details, again, Sussex County. It was at an old milk company off the side of the road, across the street from a very old graveyard, in an overgrown field of weeds next to some old barn. So already it just sounds creepy. I mean, you have an abandoned building and an abandoned farm and cemetery. So it's already kind of scary and creepy. Screepy? I guess that's what I was going to say. Observed. Back east, when I was about 14, around 1976, a buddy of mine and myself went out shooting our BB guns, and we came across this old, board-up carnation creamery. We, being kids, broke into this place. It was at least 150 years old. So we started to look at this old milk wagon and old horse and buggy. After some time, we came across this ladder that went to the attic. My friend, being smaller than myself, gave me his gun and said, "I want to take a look up there." As I watched him climb up the ladder and look inside, he yells down to me, "Dude, something up here smells really bad." As I watched him turning around on the ladder, I see him stop turning and he jumps from the top step. He comes right down next to me. I say, "What the heck did you do that for?" And he says he can see these hairy legs behind this box. Something big runs across the attic floor and breaks down this wall to the other side of the garage and runs across the roof and out into a cornfield. I remember looking across the room out the window and seeing its reflection on the window next door to the place we were in, and it was big. It ran the distance of the building in 5 or 6 foot hops, then through the wall. Funny thing about this, the doors we tried to break in flew open, and this little whirlwind comes in and stays right in the path of the cornfield, and we can see his path. Also noticed, the most interesting thing was the 2 doors that we tried to get in blew in, and that little tornado came in and stayed right in front of us for at least 1 minute, and see that path going up through the field. Other witnesses, just me and my friend. We did not tell too many people because we did not want to get in trouble. We did break in. So that's understandable. These kids, I saw Bigfoot in this place we broke into and trespassed. You're going to get in trouble. And probably laughed at for the Bigfoot aspect. Other stories. Some of my school friends said that someone was swimming or making a bunch of noise in the lake that night, and the cops put a spotlight on something big climbing out of the lake, and it ran into the woods. Interesting. Timing conditions, it occurred at 1:30ish in the afternoon, clear day, good lighting. Environment, it was by some very big overgrown fields of corn like nobody owns anymore, and there was a pit where somebody was digging dirt for who knows. So, they're kids, they're teenagers, they're in this spooky area and they don't know what's going on there. So interesting. And so here's the follow-up investigation by investigator Eric Spinner. And like I said, this one is a little long, but I think it does flesh out the story a little bit, so I'm going to read it. Chris, the witness, recounted the incident for me, providing additional details as a result of my questions. He now believes the event took place in October rather than in December, as he originally reported. On the day of the incident, it was partly cloudy, calm with temperatures in the 40s. Chris described the building as an old, dilapidated creamery that he and a friend, George, came upon one day while out shooting their BB guns. It was a 2-story building, wood construction, with windows only on the second story, most or all of which had been boarded up. Adjacent to this building was another, smaller in size but in similar condition. Between the two buildings was a road or driveway which continued on into a field towards a sand or gravel pit. On the back side of the creamery were two large wooden doors which provided access from a loading dock type area. A small roof overhung this area. Chris indicated these doors could not be opened by them as they had two planks secured to them in an X fashion. Ultimately, Chris stated that the two were able to gain entry through a small chute-like opening, which was also in the rear of the building. Once inside, Chris said they began looking around and were able to see sufficiently as a result of sunlight entering through numerous small openings in the structure. At some point, they found a narrow, permanently mounted wooden ladder on the back wall, which provided access to the second floor through an opening in the ceiling, so like an attic. Chris recalled the ceiling height was between 12 and 14 feet. George ascended the ladder, stopping once. He was able to observe the second floor area. Chris indicated that almost immediately, George exclaimed, "Oh my God, something stinks up here." And within the same breath, George practically jumped to the floor next to Chris. At that point, Chris detected the odor, which he described as bad, dirty diapers, swampy, urine-like. And we hear that a lot in these Bigfoot sightings. They'll say it was like musky, like a wet dog, like garbage, like urine and feces, swampy. So a lot of that, like sort of like decomposing vegetation. So just, nasty smells. So not surprised to hear that. As George came to his feet, he started to say he saw hairy legs protruding from behind a box when they both heard a series of booms from above as if something heavy was running across the upper floor. Chris indicated they could see the ceiling boards move and dust fall at each location this thing stepped. They followed the movement with their eyes, and after 5 or so steps, they heard a crash. At that point, through a window/opening in the wall, they saw, in a reflection from one of the windows in the adjacent building, a large human-like figure moving across the overhang above the loading dock. According to Chris, it looked left and right and then jumped from the roof as it did, the two loading dock doors blew open and they were able to see the creature directly. Chris could offer no explanation as to how these doors opened. So that's interesting and maybe false memory or an embellishment. I don't know. It sounds a little Hollywood to me, but we'll come back to that. The witnesses viewed the back of the creature and did not see its face. Chris described it as a greenish-brown in color with long hair. He indicated that even standing in the loading area pit, which he recalled being about 4 feet high, the creature was as tall as them. Chris estimated its height to be between 7 and 8 feet tall, and its elbows were almost to its waist. At that point, the creature ran directly away from the highway, the road, which was located in front of the building, back into a recently cut cornfield. So it's running into cover. Interesting. Chris indicated it was definitely not a human or a bear, as it was too big and bulky and moving away too quick. They observed it for 7 to 10 seconds until it went through or over a fence and disappeared from sight. I questioned Chris as to his opinion on how this large creature was able to get into the building when he and his friend had a tough time squeezing through the small chute. Good question. He said he didn't know, but commented that a portion of the roof had fallen in and there were trees immediately alongside the building, basically implying that it may have climbed in through the roof. Interesting. Due to the age of this incident, my attempt to verify Chris's account was limited. A review of a topographical map of the area helped me identify what I believe to be the location of the incident. The map showed a rail line, long ago abandoned, and we talked about that a few stories ago, running near a graveyard in the general vicinity of where Chris described the incident occurring. Creameries were often located along such lines. I spoke with a local historian who did recall there being 2 buildings in the general location I described to him, one of which could have very well been a creamery. So I like that this follow-up investigator is at least trying to do his homework and say, the landscape may have changed in the past, 40 years, 50, almost 50 years. So he's talking to historians, he's looking at old maps. So I like that. At least he's trying to put this story together and verify some of the details, which we always have to do. Question everything. Doesn't mean you don't believe the witness. It's just we got to paint a picture for ourselves. He continues, I subsequently visited the location and did indeed find 2 relatively small buildings sitting next to each other with a small dirt road running between them. The road led to a gravel pit, as Chris described, which was still operational. The 2 buildings had obviously been rebuilt as they were now of concrete block construction and only 1 story in height. My estimate was that the renovations were done between 15 and 20 years ago. A closer examination of the building, which would have been the creamery, indicated an original foundation of stone and mortar, which I estimated to be at least 100 years old. Within that foundation, at the rear of the building, were the remnants of what could have been a loading dock type area. Beyond the buildings, looking towards the gravel pit, were overgrown farm fields still undeveloped. I indicated that I initially found Chris to be credible. I found some of the events, actions, observations he described to be rather unique and not what I would consider fabricated, i.e., the small tornado whirlwind which formed when the doors allegedly blew open. So that part to me, there's a couple things about this story that I'm having some trouble with. One, you have, quote unquote, a Bigfoot hiding in this building, not on the first floor, but up on the second floor, which you can make cases for and against making sense. Maybe it's up on the second floor because it figures, if anybody does come in, it's not going to go up there. Someone's going to come in, look around, say, oh, it's an abandoned building, and leave and never see the Bigfoot. Secondly, yeah, how did this thing get in? It could have climbed the tree and then gone in through the roof. So a good question that Eric Spinner asked here. I think that was a very good question. How did this thing get in when two kids could barely get in? The doors blowing open and this tornado whirlwind thing being there. I mean, that just sounds almost like something out of a cartoon. Like this creature jumped and the blowback was so big, like the Incredible Hulk or something, just leaping to the ground and the shockwave blowing these doors open. It's a weird detail, and I don't know what to make of it. Like I said, it sounds very Hollywood-ish. It sounds very cartoonish. So why include it? I don't know. And, Eric Spinner saying that this guy Chris sounds credible, and I'm not saying that he's lying, but again, you're talking about a memory from almost 50 years ago. The brain can sometimes fill in a lot of blanks. It can exaggerate things, make things bigger, especially if you're a kid. If you're 14 years old and these doors, swing open or whatever, maybe you're being scared. You're seeing this thing. There's a smelly creature or something jumping from the roof to another building. I mean, it just sounds kind of crazy. So maybe the perceptions were off again. Because again, they're not children, but they're 14. They're doing something they're not supposed to be doing. This creature clearly startled them, whatever it was. I mean, this could have been a homeless person just in, ragged clothing that looked hairy, and, they're thinking Bigfoot, and maybe it's just some really big homeless guy who just didn't want to get in trouble for trespassing. Could have been mentally ill, could have been drunk, any number of things. So it's interesting. Again, it's a very detailed story, but I don't know what to make of it. Not a bear, clearly not a bear. So this is another story where you have either the witness who wrote this all out and spoke to an investigator, wasting their time and the investigator's time, is lying, just making this up. This is just a complete fabrication. For what gain, I don't know. It's a person, like I said, a homeless person or a criminal who's on the run and trying to disguise themselves and not be caught. A mentally ill person, a drunk person, who knows, a runaway, any number of things. But so we're either talking about a lie, an out and out lie. This was a person, or this was a Bigfoot type creature. They didn't get the best look at it, but greenish, that's interesting to me. Greenish brown in color. So that with the swampy smell, and there are swamps around there. There's, in this area, it's wooded. It ran into the cornfield, which again doesn't eliminate the fact that it could have been a person. If a person's trying to stay hidden and not get caught or in trouble, they're going to run into the cornfield so nobody can follow them. So I'm not too sure what to make of this one. Again, it's clearly a possible Bigfoot, whereas I think a howl in the woods or a tree knock, Bigfoot is very low on the list of possibilities. Whereas here, it's like it's three things it could be. It's a person, it's an out and out fabrication, or it's Bigfoot. I'm not saying it is Bigfoot, but it's at least higher up on the list of possibilities than a tree knock or howl story. So I'm curious to see what you guys think of this one. I saved this one for last, not just because it's like the oldest story here and the longest, but because, yeah, I think there are things about this story that ring really true, and there are things about the story that just seem very cartoonish and very like Hollywood dramatic, melodramatic. The doors blowing open and the whirlwind coming in, and like I said, like the Incredible Hulk jumping out of space and falling to Earth, and boom, you get this big blowback. So I don't know. I really don't know what to make of this one. Let me know what you guys think. But these are the 4 stories for tonight, and I think these are all pretty cool. Okay, everybody. So that's going to wrap up the episode for tonight. 4 more stories from Sussex County. The Sparta Ren Fair is sadly done for the year. So if you guys are interested, check it out for next year. You could just Google it, Sparta, New Jersey Ren Fair. Runs 3 weekends every September. So give them a look next year. It's affordable. It's a fun day out. All the entertainers and performers and people there, the vendors, it's just a great experience. One of our favorite Ren Fairs now. We've been to a bunch over the past 2 years, but one of our favorites. So, we started last season. So last year, I guess, last 2 seasons, not 2 years, but we started last September with the New York Ren Fair. We've been to PA. We've been to a couple others in Jersey and Connecticut. And this one is one of our favorites though. So please check it out. Again, go show some love to my buddy Andy over at the Spooky Island Radio podcast. I will be on his show on Monday, and we talk about all sorts of things. It's a longer episode. But just because Andy and I were really interested in this stuff, and when we get together, we can talk about it for a long time. We could have gone even longer, but we kind of had to cut the episode short. And we're both kind of awkward and nervous about doing podcasts with other people. So it turned out really well, though, because Andy's just consummate professional. Great guy. Check out his podcast. And until next time, everybody, again, question everything. It doesn't mean you're not believing the witness or the story or that these things can exist. It's just you have to question the details. And I like that these BFRO investigators, especially the last guy, like went to this location, pulled up old maps, talked to historians, like really tried to rebuild this whole creamery building situation just to make sure that it actually existed. Because anybody can say, oh yeah, I went to this building 50 years ago, it's not there anymore, but I had this weird experience. And a lot of people just take that at face value. Oh, okay, the buildings aren't there anymore, and that would be it. So I do appreciate when someone does the research to go back and check and say, was this really there? Not that it makes the story true, but it does add credibility to the story. And it just shows that not all researchers just accept everything blindly. So many of them do. So many are just like, oh, you tell me this and you're credible. You're credible. And a lot of people seem credible, but you got to dig a little deeper. You got to question everything. So that's my perpetual advice at the end of every show. So we will see you next week, everybody. Rock and roll. Huzzah.